The ballroom glittered like a palace of glass and light. Crystal chandeliers cascaded brilliance across silk-draped tables, where the city's wealthiest and most powerful mingled with glasses of champagne in hand. Music from a live string quartet swirled through the air, elegant and intoxicating, masking the faint hum of whispered gossip beneath. At the heart of it all stood Christopher Ward, billionaire industrialist, a man whose name commanded respect and fear in equal measure. He carried himself with effortless confidence, the kind born of money, power, and a lifetime of winning. Tonight, he wore his authority like armor, an impeccable tuxedo, a measured smile, and a gaze that made people straighten when it fell on them. By his side, Isabella Hartley radiated the kind of beauty that photographs failed to capture. Her gown shimmered in the light, silver threads glinting as she moved gracefully among admirers. She laughed at compliments, charmed donors, and clung delicately to Christopher's arm, the perfect picture of a devoted fiancée. To the watching crowd, they were untouchable, royalty in a kingdom of wealth. Yet, beneath the glamour, something subtle pulsed. Christopher felt it, though he couldn't name it, a shift in the atmosphere, an almost imperceptible chill weaving through the warmth of laughter and music. Eyes lingered on him longer than usual. Conversations quieted when he passed. He dismissed it with a sip of champagne, letting the bubbles fizz against his tongue. Just another night of excess, another performance for the rich. Unaware, he raised his glass again to toast a familiar face, never imagining that within these walls, beneath the chandeliers and the glitter, the first cracks in his perfect life were about to form. And it would all begin with a whisper. Christopher adjusted his cufflinks as a tray of champagne glasses appeared beside him. The server holding it was young, her hands steady but her eyes betraying nerves. She was not like the polished staff typically employed for such an elite gala. Her dark curls were tucked neatly under her cap, but her expression carried the weight of someone out of place. "Champagne, sir?" she asked softly, her voice almost swallowed by the music and chatter. Christopher reached for the glass nearest to him. But just as his fingers brushed the stem, the young woman leaned in closer than etiquette allowed. Her breath trembled against the air as she whispered, so low it barely reached his ears. "Don't drink it. There's something in there." For a fraction of a second, Christopher froze, his hand still hovering near the glass. His eyes snapped to hers, sharp and unyielding, searching for meaning in her face. Naomi Carter, he didn't know her name yet, but he'd remember those eyes forever, looked back at him with urgent intensity, her lips pressing together as though she had already said too much. Before he could question her, she stepped back with practiced grace, blending into the current of servers weaving through the crowd. By the time Christopher turned, she was gone, swallowed by sequins and tuxedos. He stood rooted, the untouched glass still gleaming on the tray. The words replayed in his mind like a warning bell. "There's something in there." Suspicion slithered into his chest. Who in this room would dare to drug him? A rival, a business partner, an enemy hiding behind polite smiles? Or, his gaze shifted briefly to Isabella, radiant as she charmed a circle of admirers, someone closer? Christopher set his jaw, the taste of unease stronger than any champagne. Whatever this night was, it had just turned dangerous. Christopher smiled faintly, masking the unease curdling in his chest. With a practiced motion, he set the champagne flute back on the tray, careful not to draw attention. To anyone watching, it looked casual, effortless, the gesture of a man who simply wasn't in the mood for another drink. But inside, the whisper clung to him like smoke. "Don't drink it." His eyes shifted across the ballroom, finding Isabella almost instantly. She was surrounded by admirers, laughter spilling from her lips like a song rehearsed too many times. Her hand rested lightly on the arm of a city councilman, her posture poised, perfect, as though sculpted for the cameras that followed her everywhere. And yet, Christopher noticed something else. The laugh was too sharp. The sparkle in her eyes, forced. For years, he had overlooked small things, the phone calls she'd end too quickly, the vague explanations, the way her stories sometimes contradicted themselves. He had told himself it was nothing, the paranoia of a man too protective of what was his. But tonight, those doubts resurfaced with razor edges. Naomi's warning had planted a seed, and now every movement Isabella made seemed to water it. Was it possible? Could she, of all people, be part of something against him? The thought tightened his chest. This was the woman he had promised his future to, the woman he had paraded proudly before the world. Yet suddenly, He wasn't sure if he was standing beside a partner or a stranger. The music swelled, drowning the room in elegance. Christopher forced a smile, but inside, his mind churned. He would find the truth. He had to. Christopher slipped away from the golden glow of the ballroom, following the faint glimpse of the young waitress through a narrow service corridor. The air here was different, cooler, stripped of glamour, carrying the metallic tang of polished trays and the muted scurry of staff. "Wait," he called softly, his voice low but firm. Naomi froze mid-step, her back stiffening. Slowly, she turned, her eyes widening as she recognized him. I shouldn't be here," she stammered, already shifting as though to leave. Christopher blocked her path, not aggressively, but with the commanding presence of a man who was not used to being ignored. "You need to tell me what you meant," he said. Back in the hall. "About the drink." Her throat worked as she swallowed, torn between fear and duty. "You weren't supposed to know," she whispered, glancing around as though the very walls might be listening. "I overheard them. Your fiancée, Isabella. She was with a man in the West Garden before the gala. They were arguing, but I heard it clear. They said you needed to be distracted. That the drink would take care of it." Christopher's jaw tightened. "You're certain?" Naomi's hands trembled around the tray she still carried, but her gaze was steady. "I wouldn't risk this if I wasn't. If anyone finds out I said something, I could lose my job, worse. Nobody here would take my word over hers." For the first time that evening, the world tilted differently. Christopher searched her face. The fear was real, but so was the conviction. She wasn't lying. "You understand what you've done?" he asked quietly. Naomi nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes. But I couldn't just watch it happen." And in that moment, Christopher believed her. Back in the heart of the gala, Christopher stood among the glittering throng of guests, yet he felt utterly alone. The chandeliers above blazed with light, but in his mind, shadows stretched long and dark. Naomi's words gnawed at him, burrowing into the cracks of his carefully built certainty. He thought of Isabella, how dazzling she had been from the very beginning. Their engagement had been the event of the season, designer gowns, magazine covers, whispers of envy in every social circle. Together, they embodied the dream of perfection. But dreams, Christopher realized, often came wrapped in illusions. The memories flickered sharper now. Isabella's subtle insistence on controlling every decision, what charities he should endorse, what business ventures were safe for his image, even the friends worth keeping. At first, he had mistaken it for care, for her way of protecting him. But beneath the surface, there had always been something colder. A hunger. And money. Always money. Her fascination with his wealth was cloaked in charm, yet unmistakable. She relished the prestige, the power that came from being tied to him, not the man, but the empire. Could she truly be capable of plotting against him? His mind recoiled, but the seed of doubt had grown into something heavier, pressing on his chest. He had ignored his instincts for too long, letting her beauty and confidence blur the truth. Now, the whisper of betrayal chilled him more than the evening air ever could. Naomi's frightened honesty had cracked something wide open, and for the first time, Christopher wondered if he had invited poison into his own life long before that drink was ever poured. And the thought terrified him. Christopher excused himself from the gala floor, slipping into one of the quieter rooms reserved for staff and security. With a calmness that masked the storm in his chest, he handed the untouched glass of champagne to his most trusted bodyguard, Marcus, a man whose loyalty had been tested more than once. "Run a discreet test," Christopher ordered in a low voice. "No one knows but you. Bring me the results immediately." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but didn't question. Understood. As the minutes dragged on, Christopher returned to the ballroom, every nerve straining to keep his composure. Isabella glided through the crowd, dazzling in her silver gown, her laughter tinkling like a bell. She looked flawless, untouchable, yet now, every glance, every smile felt rehearsed. He studied her the way one might study a mask, searching for cracks in porcelain. An hour later, Marcus reappeared, his face grim. He handed over a folded slip of paper. Christopher opened it with steady hands, though his pulse thundered in his ears. Result: positive. Trace amounts of sedative detected. The words struck him like a blade. Naomi had told the truth. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt, the golden lights above spinning into a blur. His fiancée, his future wife, had plotted against him. Rage simmered beneath his ribs, but alongside it rose a colder instinct, patience. No, he couldn't confront her now. Not with so many eyes watching, not without knowing how deep this betrayal ran. If Isabella had planned this, she had an accomplice. Perhaps more than one. A trap this delicate required cunning, and he would give her none of the satisfaction of seeing him falter. Instead, he pasted on his most practiced smile and rejoined her at the table, even leaning in to brush a kiss against her cheek. She beamed, utterly unaware that her game was no longer hers to control. Inside, Christopher had already shifted the board. The pieces were in motion, and now, it was his turn to play. Christopher caught Naomi during a lull in the kitchen, where clattering dishes and hurried footsteps drowned out most private words. She looked up, startled to see him again, her tray trembling slightly in her hands. "You were right," he said quietly, his eyes steady. "The drink was drugged." Naomi's lips parted, but she quickly glanced around, making sure no one else was listening. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I wasn't supposed to hear them. I was clearing glasses near the side garden. Isabella and a man, tall, dark suit, I didn't see his face. She said you'd never see it coming. That once you were compromised, it would be easy to destroy your reputation." They laughed about how no one questions a scandal when the story is written well enough. Christopher's jaw clenched. "A scandal?" Naomi nodded, her hands twisting nervously. "She wants to frame you for something ugly. Drugs, maybe worse. I didn't catch all the details, but I knew it was serious. If that drink had touched your lips, you wouldn't have been able to defend yourself. They'd have proof, pictures, witnesses, whatever they planned." For a moment, Christopher simply stared, the glittering image of Isabella shattering further in his mind. The woman he thought he would marry was plotting not only to betray him but to destroy everything he had built. Naomi's voice quivered. "I almost didn't say anything. People like me don't interfere in the world of people like you. I thought, maybe no one would believe me. But I couldn't let an innocent man walk into a trap." Christopher felt something shift inside him as he looked at her, this young woman with no power, no safety net, risking everything for the truth. Vulnerable, yes, but also braver than most of the so-called elites filling his ballroom. He inclined his head. "You did the right thing. And now, Naomi, I need you to trust me. Because this isn't over." Christopher returned to the ballroom with Naomi's words still echoing in his ears. The chandeliers above glittered like frozen stars, spilling golden light over the opulence of the evening. Laughter, music, and the clinking of crystal glasses painted the illusion of perfection. But all of it felt hollow now, an elaborate performance staged for a man who finally understood his role as the audience, not the lead. And there she was. Isabella. She glided across the room in her emerald gown, every inch of her carefully curated persona radiating charm. Her laughter rang out like champagne bubbles, light and effortless. She leaned into conversations with practiced grace, offering compliments that seemed genuine to anyone who didn't know her as he now did. To the room, she was the flawless fiancée of Christopher Ward, elegant, loyal, untouchable. But to him, she was poison wrapped in silk. Christopher's fists curled inside his pockets, nails biting into his palms as he studied her. Every delicate gesture, the way her fingers brushed someone's arm, the coy tilt of her head, the lingering eye contact, suddenly felt sinister, a mask hiding the venom beneath. He could see her lips curve into smiles, and he wondered how many of those smiles had been lies whispered into his own ear. She caught his gaze across the room, her eyes sparkling like they always did when she wanted to remind him that he was hers. The corners of her mouth lifted, warm and reassuring to anyone else. But Christopher saw the cracks now, the faint calculation lurking behind her expression. His chest tightened with rage, but he forced his jaw to remain still, his expression unreadable. Exposing her tonight would be reckless. He needed proof, leverage, the perfect moment to tear away her mask in front of the very people she sought to manipulate. As the music swelled and Isabella raised her glass to toast with a circle of admirers, Christopher felt the weight of the duality pressing down on him. To them, she was perfection incarnate. To him, she was a serpent smiling in borrowed skin. And for the first time, Christopher knew he was standing on the edge of war. Christopher's mind raced as he moved through the crowd, every detail of the gala sharpening into focus. The glittering gowns, the rich laughter, the tinkling of crystal, it was all a mask, and tonight he would tear it away. Isabella thought she had orchestrated a flawless plan, but now the stage was his. The drugged champagne still lingered at the edge of a tray, untouched since Naomi had warned him. Christopher's eyes flicked toward the glass, gleaming innocently under the ballroom lights. His jaw tightened. That glass had been meant to destroy him. Tonight, it would destroy her. Naomi appeared at his side, moving discreetly with a tray of fresh glasses. Her hands trembled slightly as she leaned close, her voice a whisper. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "If it backfires?" Christopher met her gaze, steady and determined. "It won't. Stay close. When the time comes, I'll need you to confirm what you heard." Her throat bobbed with a nervous swallow, but she nodded. "Okay." Seizing his moment, Christopher reached for Isabella's glass while her attention was fixed on a cluster of admirers. With practiced ease, he switched it with the drugged one, sliding the poisoned drink seamlessly into her hand. No one noticed. Not even her. Across the room, Isabella laughed, dazzling her audience, oblivious to the trap now resting between her fingers. Christopher stepped back, his pulse pounding, and exhaled slowly. The room seemed quieter somehow, as if the gala itself was holding its breath. Naomi lingered nearby, pale but resolute, her eyes locked on Isabella. For the first time since the night began, Christopher felt control return to him. The net was set, the bait taken. And Isabella Hartley, his perfect fiancée, his would-be betrayer, was about to drink her own downfall. The clinking of glasses rang out across the ballroom as the master of ceremonies called for a toast. Crystal sparkled under the chandeliers, and the air buzzed with elegance and laughter. Isabella stood tall at Christopher's side, her emerald gown shimmering like liquid light. Her eyes glowed with triumph as if she had already won some secret game. "Ladies and gentlemen," she purred, lifting her glass, "tonight we celebrate not only charity, but love and partnership. To Christopher, and to our future." The crowd erupted with applause. Cameras flashed. Isabella turned to Christopher with a dazzling smile, her lips brushing the rim of her glass. She sipped, slow and confident, savoring her moment of dominance. But then, it began. At first, it was subtle. Her hand wavered slightly as she lowered the glass. She blinked, trying to steady her gaze. Then her speech faltered as she attempted another word of thanks. To our future," her voice cracked, the syllables slurring together. Gasps spread through the crowd as Isabella stumbled forward, her balance failing. Her glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the polished floor. She swayed, clutching at air, before collapsing in a graceless heap. Chaos rippled instantly. Guests murmured in panic, whispers flooding the room like wildfire. What happened? Is she drunk? Is she sick? Christopher stepped forward, his face hard, his voice cutting through the hysteria like steel. Silence. The crowd hushed. Every eye turned to him. He looked down at Isabella, writhing weakly on the floor, her glamour stripped away. Then he raised his gaze to the guests, his words deliberate and ice-cold. The drink in her hand was not meant for her. It was meant for me. A ripple of shock surged through the room. He continued, unwavering. Traces of sedatives were found in the champagne earlier tonight. She sought to drug me, to discredit me, perhaps worse. But she drank her own poison instead. Gasps, shouts, disbelief. The room divided between horror and fascination. And as Isabella's facade shattered before them all, Christopher's unmasking was complete. The perfect fiancé had been exposed, not as a lover, but as a traitor. The ballroom glittered with luxury, chandeliers casting golden halos, violins playing softly, and crystal glasses raised in elegance. At the center of it all stood Isabella Hartley, radiant in her emerald gown, her arm looped through Christopher Ward's. The perfect image of power and grace. She raised her glass high, her voice ringing with practiced poise. To Christopher, to our love, and to the bright future ahead of us. Her smile gleamed as though she had already won, her confidence untouchable. Cameras flashed, capturing her beauty and composure. Then she drank. A slow, deliberate sip. At first, nothing seemed wrong. The applause swelled, guests clinking glasses in unison. But as Isabella lowered her drink, a strange tremor rippled through her hand. Her confident smile flickered. She blinked rapidly, as though fighting to steady herself. Her voice wavered. "To our fut," the words slurred, the vowels bleeding into each other. A sharp gasp cut through the crowd as she stumbled forward, clutching at her gown. Her glass slipped from her hand and shattered across the marble floor, champagne pooling like a silver stain. Isabella swayed, her legs buckling beneath her. With a strangled gasp, she collapsed. The crowd erupted, whispers overlapping, panic spreading like wildfire. What's happening? Is she ill? Was she drinking too much? Christopher stepped forward, his face carved from stone, his voice slicing through the hysteria. Enough. The chatter died instantly. All eyes turned to him. He looked down at Isabella, writhing weakly on the floor, then lifted his gaze to the crowd. His tone was cold, commanding. The truth must be told. That drink was not meant for her, it was meant for me. A shocked murmur swept through the guests. The champagne contained a sedative, Christopher continued, steady and unwavering. She intended to drug me, to humiliate me before you all. But fate is cruel, she drank her own poison. Gasps filled the air. Some clutched their pearls, others exchanged horrified looks. Isabella's carefully constructed mask of perfection had crumbled before the very society she sought to control. Christopher stood tall, unflinching. The betrayal had been revealed, not whispered behind closed doors, but under the merciless gaze of the world. The air in the ballroom was thick with shock, whispers darting across the crowd like sparks. Isabella lay slumped, her emerald gown sprawled across the marble floor, her face pale yet still defiant in fleeting moments of lucidity. The carefully polished mask of a perfect fiancée had shattered. Christopher stood tall, his gaze sweeping across the audience before motioning toward his head of security. 2 guards stepped forward, their presence authoritative, silencing the murmurs. One held a sealed envelope, the other a digital tablet. With all due diligence, Christopher announced, his voice clear and commanding, I had the drink tested before tonight. Here are the results, conclusive evidence of a sedative, meant to incapacitate me. Gasps echoed as the tablet was displayed, showing the toxicology report. The guards nodded in confirmation, their testimony ironclad. Then, with a steady hand, Christopher gestured toward the edge of the room. And there is someone without whom the truth would have remained hidden. Naomi Carter froze, the tray still trembling in her hands. The spotlight, once reserved for society's elite, now fell upon the young black waitress in her modest uniform. Hesitant, she stepped forward, every step heavy, her heart pounding in her chest. Christopher's voice softened but carried immense weight. This young woman risked everything to warn me. When she could have stayed silent, she chose courage. All eyes turned to Naomi. Whispers shifted, not of scandal, but of admiration. Some guests nodded, others clapped hesitantly, the tide of respect growing louder. Meanwhile, the room recoiled from Isabella. Faces twisted in disgust, the very people who once fawned over her now distancing themselves, as though betrayal were contagious. In that moment, Naomi stood taller, her trembling stilled. The powerless had become powerful. The glittering ballroom, once Isabella's kingdom, had turned into a tribunal. Dozens of eyes followed her every move as she struggled to rise, her hands shaking, her voice straining for control. This is absurd, she cried, pointing a trembling finger at Naomi. She's lying. That girl put something in the drink, she's jealous, she wants money, attention. You're all fools to believe her. Her words echoed with a sharp desperation, but the room no longer leaned in awe. Instead, whispers of disbelief and disgust rippled through the guests. The same society figures who once praised her poise now recoiled, unwilling to be associated with the venom in her tone. Christopher stepped forward, his expression an unyielding mask of ice. Enough, Isabella. His voice silenced the crowd instantly. You claim Naomi framed you. Then explain why the drink meant for me, delivered by your own hand, tested positive for a sedative. Explain the conversation Naomi overheard between you and Edward Blackwell. Or better yet, he paused, pulling out a stack of documents from his security team. Explain these. The papers bore damning evidence, financial transfers, secret accounts, and communications tying Isabella to a scheme that would have left Christopher incapacitated and disgraced, his fortunes siphoned away. Isabella's lips parted, but no words came. The weight of proof crushed her defenses. Her glamorous mask slipped, revealing the raw bitterness beneath. The crowd gasped, whispers swelling into a storm of condemnation. Former admirers turned their backs, their smiles replaced by sneers. Isabella's once perfect image dissolved in front of everyone. 2 security guards stepped closer, their silent presence an unspoken verdict. Christopher gave a cold nod, and she was escorted toward the exit. Her heels clicked against the marble floor, each step echoing her fall from grace. The queen of the gala had become its ultimate spectacle of ruin. And Naomi, the girl Isabella had tried to erase, now stood taller in her shadow. Away from the glittering chaos of the ballroom, Christopher found Naomi in the dimly lit corridor outside the service hall. She stood with her back pressed against the wall, her hands clenched nervously around her apron. The echoes of laughter and scandal still drifted faintly from the gala, but here it was quiet, intimate. "Naomi," Christopher said softly, his tone carrying none of the cold edge he had shown Isabella. Instead, it was weighted with sincerity. "You saved me tonight." Her wide eyes lifted to his, shining with uncertainty. I wasn't sure if you would believe me," she confessed, her voice trembling. "People like me, people in my position, we don't get listened to. I thought, maybe you'd have me thrown out. Or worse." The raw honesty in her words tightened something in his chest. For the first time in a long while, Christopher saw beyond wealth, beyond the glittering facades of society. He saw courage. He saw someone who had risked everything without expecting anything in return. "You weren't ignored," he said firmly. "You'll never be forgotten, Naomi. Not by me." Her breath caught at his words, and for a moment she couldn't reply. She had spent her life invisible to men like him, billionaires, untouchable in their world of power. Yet here he was, looking at her not as a servant, not as a shadow in the background, but as someone who mattered. A faint smile curved her lips, half relief, half disbelief. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. Christopher inclined his head, his expression steady and resolute. "No, Naomi. Thank you." In that fragile silence, an unlikely bond was forged, between a billionaire betrayed and a waitress who dared to tell the truth. The gala had ended in shambles, but Christopher lingered long after the last guest departed. The chandeliers still glittered above him, though the room felt hollow, stripped of its former grandeur. He stood near the grand staircase, staring at the place where Isabella had once stood, smiling sweetly, weaving her lies. The betrayal cut deep, but another image lingered more vividly in his mind, Naomi's trembling hands and determined whisper, "Don't drink it." For years, Christopher had believed strength meant surrounding himself with the powerful, investors, socialites, politicians. Tonight, it wasn't the elite who saved him. It was a young waitress, overlooked by everyone, who had risked everything with nothing to gain. As Naomi prepared to leave with the other staff, he stopped her once again. She froze, wide-eyed, clutching the strap of her tray bag. "You should go home and rest," he told her gently. "But I want you to know, what you did tonight changed me." Naomi shook her head, disbelief etched across her face. "I'm just a waitress, Mr. Ward. I don't change people like you." A quiet chuckle escaped him, but his eyes remained serious. "That's where you're wrong. You've shown me something none of my so-called friends ever could, what loyalty, courage, and honesty look like when there's nothing in it for you. That matters more than any title or fortune." Her throat tightened, and for a moment, Naomi couldn't find words. She had only wanted to do the right thing, never expecting recognition. Christopher straightened his shoulders, a new resolve burning within him. "People like Isabella thrive because men like me trust too blindly. I won't make that mistake again. From now on, I'll measure trust not by wealth or charm, but by character." Naomi's lips curved into the faintest smile. She had been invisible all evening, but in this moment, she mattered. And Christopher knew, this was the turning point, the first step into a different kind of future.